Welcome to the Lindsay Hadley Podcast Show, where weekly I interview some of the world's most inspiring people from business, philanthropy, and entertainment. I love collecting humans, and these are some of my favorites I found along the way. This podcast has been brought to us by Capita Financial Network.
Do you need help with the next steps of your financial plan? Think Capita. Capita is a financial network built around you. They have a team of financial advisors, CPAs, estate attorneys, Medicare providers, and Social Security experts to help you accomplish your financial goals. Call or schedule a complimentary consultation at 801-566-5058 or visit their website at capitafinancialnetwork.com. You can also check out their financial education podcast, The Financial Call, available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and YouTube.
Hi, welcome to the Lindsay Hadley Podcast Show. Today we have on our podcast Chris Grosso, who's the CEO of Intersection. He's had an amazing career, both attending some of the most prestigious schools, both Harvard and Yale. In addition to that, he's had leadership roles at NBC Universal and AOL and Hearst. He's also been pioneering the future of what our cities in America look like, which I'm really excited for him to talk about. So, Chris, why don't we start off by just having you share a little bit about your background and what got you to be a part of this work now at Intersection, and maybe share with our audience what Intersection is actually doing.
Well, yeah, maybe we'll start with what the company does. So Chris Grosso, I'm the CEO of Intersection. I've been with the company 9 years, as CEO for the last 3 years, and we're in the business of making cities better. We focus on bringing major American cities three things: consumer amenities. If you've been in New York, like the Link NYC program, where we've deployed 2,000 Wi-Fi kiosks across New York City. We do bus shelters. We do customer information systems for major transit authorities. We do bus shelters for places like Philadelphia. But really build consumer amenities for major cities. We then overlay content on those amenities. Most of our business is digital. We'll put digital content on screens like what time your train is coming or what the weather is. And then we make money by selling data-driven advertising. So we'll work with the city, we'll work with the transit authority, we'll put this amenity in place, and then it'll all be supported by ads. Most notable, as I said, our most notable project is the Link NYC program in New York, where we worked with the city of New York to reinvent the phone booth. We took out all the traditional phone booths a few years back and replaced them with these kiosks that both have telecommunication services, but also have 55-inch digital screens that put content and advertising, and that's how we pay for the program. We've had 15 million people in New York use the Wi-Fi. We've had thousands of people. We still have thousands and thousands of phone calls made every day, whether that be 911 or 311 or for tourists. We deliver advertising and content across the city. And we've done similar projects in other places like New York and Chicago and Philadelphia and San Francisco and the like.
Wow, that's so impressive. And you, like you said, you're literally transforming cities to be more futuristic. With all of the utility that you're developing, what do you find is the greatest leadership challenges that you're facing as you scale across America's cities?
Well, I think there's a couple things. One of the things that's interesting about our business is we are in the technology business, we're in the media business, and we are in the working with cities business. And I think you need a very eclectic set of skill sets on the team to be able to do these types of projects. So we have people who deal with the cities on a day-to-day basis and have government relations. And that's a really key part of our business is working with the cities around franchise agreements, which are 10 to 20-year deals to get access to the right-of-way to do these kinds of projects. We have technologists. We've got software engineers. Our CTO helped start DoubleClick to have to do software to monitor devices in the street and put ads on the screens. We have ad salespeople who have to go out and sell advertising and marketing people to put together the ad packages for the ad salespeople to sell. But then we also have people who do construction and pull fiber and dig trenches. So it's this eclectic skill set and managing across those, which is challenging. I was always a digital media guy, and I've learned more about trenching and pulling fiber and power through sidewalks than I ever would have thought I would have done. So I think it's probably the biggest challenge for us is this: we have to be the business has to be good at a lot of different things, and we've got a small but very talented team that across these different disciplines.
Oh my goodness. So that was my first thought is your background with leadership at NBC Universal and AOL. Was that all in digital advertising? And is that what's transferred most, I guess, in your new role?
Yeah, so the first third of my career, I was a management consultant in digital media for McKinsey. Then went on to operating roles in the digital media group at AOL. Sorry, at NBC, and then moved over to AOL, which was obviously a digital media business, and then moved back to a digital media group at Hearst before I ended up here. And I was always passionate about the media business. I was also always passionate about cities. So an intersection is great because I get to do both. We get to work very closely with cities and try to make cities better, and spend a lot of time with government and thinking about government's problems, but also we're in the media business. We sell ads, we put content on screen, so we're programming the streets of these major U.S. cities.
So, what is your core economic structure then in this? Does both government help underwrite these costs, or is it all paid for by the advertising?
It's all paid for by the advertising. So we will typically sell the ads and put up the capital. And in some cases, in most cases, we put up the capital and pay for it out of the ads. In some cases, the city or the transit authority might put up the capital. And in some cases, there are assets that a transit authority in particular will want us to just help monetize and maybe digitize. So, we have a very good business still putting wrapping buses with advertising that go around the streets. And oftentimes we use the revenue stream from the bus advertising to pay, for instance, to digitize the train system. And the digitization is important both from a revenue perspective, but also just to tell you what time your train is coming is really important. So getting these customer information networks out to these cities is important. And you can sometimes use the existing infrastructure like the bus network or the static bus shelters, put signs up there. People want to advertise that at them. That revenue then can pay for these types of amenities.
So, Chris, with the moving digital world, the fact that people live so much online through social media and they're consuming on their phones, and we can actually have such strong analytics behind, social media, for example, advertising. What is it? What is the value proposition, and how do you sell into these big brands that this more affinity-driven,
Sure.
experience is like valuable?
Sure. So I think out-of-home advertising has a unique space in the media value chain. I've worked in all kinds of media, and one of the reasons I like out-of-home is you have the ability to really cut through the clutter and build a brand at scale in the local municipality. So people notice these ads. I mean, you notice, if you walk down the streets in New York, you're going to see all that advertising. We've got plenty of data to do that. So we control distribution in these cities. We're not beholden to Facebook or Google to get our traffic. We put our ads where the people are. So at one level, out of home, our advertising, but out of home in general has held up very well through this digital transition because people want to be in real life. They want to engage in real life. They have their head up and they're looking around. Otherwise, they'll walk out in the street or something. So you got to watch where you're going, and you will see these ads up. So we unlike most forms of traditional media, we still in out of homes still command big audiences with large degrees of engagement. Moreover, what we found is that there's a lot of crossover between the offline environment, the real life environment, and the online environment. So one of the trends you'll see is that a really exciting out-of-home ad, people are going to post those ads to their social media. And there's, lots of research about, large portions of the population will post ads they see on social media. I like to say, no one ever, takes a picture of a selfie in front of a banner ad on the computer, but everyone takes a selfie in front of a billboard or for a digital screen, and people want to engage with the advertising that way. What we've also been able to do in a privacy-friendly way is working with anonymized data. We know where cell phone devices might be in view of one of our ads, and then we can also tell whether that person might have gone to a coffee shop. And when you look at that, we can actually prove these ads work because the uptick we see when someone's been exposed to an ad. And whether they will go to a store after they've seen that ad, oftentimes people are 50, 75, 100% more likely to go into a store. And it makes sense. If you're walking down the street in the winter, it's 7 a.m. and we have a geo-targeted ad that's time day parted for the morning right outside the Dunkin' Donuts or the Starbucks, and you see that ad, you are more likely, I mean, it's intuitive, but we can show the data to show that you're more likely to go in and get a coffee. And we see that over and over again in many different categories, whether it be entertainment, whether it be bars, whether it be retail, or whether it be restaurants. And we also have seen similar data. If people, see an ad, they're more likely to go to the website for lead generation. So these ads work, and the out of home, and leave aside the pandemic for a second. Out of home's been a consistent, strong, growing medium. Not quite growing as fast as digital, but certainly growing at a nice clip, particularly when you compare it to the other forms of traditional media, which are mostly in decline.
That's such a helpful context. I really liked how you said the geotagging. And when do you find then your biggest advertising clients are going to be like blue chip companies, B2C companies? Like, how do you identify in your business? Because there's people that are listening that are entrepreneurs,
right?
And how do they determine if it's worthwhile for them to do that at that level when you're starting to go with more of that brand awareness advertising?
Sure.
Direct conversions.
Sure. I think we typically we like to think of three big categories of advertisers. One are big national brands, Fortune 100 types of brands, movie studios, streaming services, the big tech brands, the big retailers, big food, Coke, Pepsi, Diageo, beverage. Those types of advertisers are one big chunk of our business, for sure. And they're both buying, digital advertising, digital out-of-home advertising, and in some cases they're doing big experiences where HBO, for instance, owns an entire train station in Los Angeles right outside their headquarters. DoorDash has fully controls the bike share program in Los Angeles. DraftKings has an entire train station that they own right outside Wrigley Field. So you can see that they'll do various types of campaigns. Oftentimes they're highly seasonal, so new product launches, Q4 is a huge quarter for us in retail. All the big luxury brands like to advertise around Fashion Week. So that's like your classic Fortune 500 types of brands. The second category is our S&B business, which is really the backbone of the business. So law firms, hospitals, doctors' offices, plumbing firms, home improvement, higher education, the government itself. These types of local institutions that really want to advertise and blanket a city, and oftentimes they do long-term deals with us. A lot of the law firms will basically have long-term deals to promote their legal practices across the city, or same thing with the big hospital chains and that type of thing. So that's really the second big category of advertiser. And then the third big category of advertisers I like to say are what I call challenger and attacker brands, oftentimes in the DTC space, oftentimes in the SaaS space, that are emerging technology brands that have really engaged with the media because they do see performance and they do want to build brands, particularly in some of these major cities like New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and to a lesser extent, Chicago, Philadelphia. But if you're an attacker brand, both from you want to drive consumer engagement, you want to reach influencers, you want to reach the investing community, having a big presence in out-of-home advertising in San Francisco or Los Angeles or Chicago or particularly New York is really important. So those are the three big categories: the national brands, the S&P brands, and what I like to say, the attacker brands that are trying to build their business.
That makes so much sense. If you're trying to build a brand saturation, and people start to have these impressions, they start to build an affinity there. In terms of like which cities you decide to invest in, you just announced a $20 million upgrade for Link. Isn't that right, for Link New York City? How do you determine, and what's the strategic thinking behind what investments you make in certain cities and which cities you're in? Is it based on traffic? Is it based on demand? Like how does that play in your strategy?
Our team likes to say we like to be in NFL cities. So top 25 DMAs, top 25 population centers, top 25 economic centers. So the big U.S. cities, and what we like to say NFL cities, do they have an NFL team? Do they have an NBA team? That's kind of a good sort of proxy for whether it's a city we want to be in. And then from there, it really depends on whether there's a franchise that is available for us to bid on, or we have a historic relationship. And these franchise agreements, whether they be with the cities or the transit authorities, may only come up every 5 or 10 years. So we had a predecessor company that had a long tradition of being in a version of this business around transit advertising. So they had a lot of relationships with the transit authorities and with the cities. So, obviously we started there. And then as cities come up in that threshold of the top 25 U.S. markets, if there's a good opportunity that we can make the economics work, we'll bid on it and try to put together an opportunity to go at it. But these are bid out through an RFP process, through a procurement process that could be anywhere from 6 to 18 months long. And then you got to win, and you got to win by it's scored based on, do you have a good product, and is the deal financially attractive to the city?
So I'm just sitting here thinking, we just recently won the Winter Olympics bid for Salt Lake City, Utah, where I'm based. Do you ever think strategically that way, where you're like, hey, there's this moment in time and it's not going to be longevity, but like if we transformed and took over, I mean, the level of traffic would supersede, anybody's wildest dreams during that season. Is that something you ever do where it's temporary? Is it only stuff that's going to be longevity around your model?
Usually it's stuff with longevity, but we do think carefully, both when we're bidding, but also as we're operating the business on these big, to your point, opportunities. When there's a Super Bowl in a city, or a Democrat, we're in Chicago, we're having a good month in Chicago because of the DNC. National convention, a Super Bowl, the Final Four, we do see a significant uptick in revenue because people want to reach those audiences when people are there. The big event where we're most excited about actually is the World Cup. Because, you think about the Super Bowl, we're in 6 of the major World Cup cities. And that's like having, and each of those cities has 6 or 8 World Cup games. And that's like, 6 or 8 Super Bowls in 6 cities. So, it's a very exciting opportunity for us and the at-home industry in general. I think when you take the trends of soccer and people wanting to be in live events and the intrinsic strength in out-of-home advertising, I think you're going to see us, but also the entire out-of-home industry have a very strong 2026 because I do think the World Cup is going to be a massive event. Soccer has gotten so big in the United States. Sports has gotten so big in the United States. Live events have gotten so big in the United States. So, when this is going to be like Messi plus Taylor Swift type scale of an event, I think, for the World Cup.
That's super helpful, Chris. So as you're looking at emerging technologies, what's like on the horizon for us as a general population? Like, are you seeing any kind of things that are going to have an impact on the urban environments around us that you're like, hey, you guys can't even believe what's coming up next? I mean, the technology, exponential growth with AI and interactive virtual reality, mixed reality. I mean, do kind of are you guys on the cutting edge of that, like looking to the future?
Well, you're always looking to the future, but one of the most interesting trends, I think, is how cities are changing and evolving due to the coming out of the pandemic and in hybrid work. And a couple big trends that we're noticing that we think are important and interesting. The first is when you look at traffic patterns within a city. Historically, you'd have this big burst of everyone goes into work in center city districts, and then they spread back out into neighborhoods. And what we've seen, we actually saw this during the pandemic and even now, is the traffic in center cities dropped precipitously during the pandemic, but the traffic in the neighborhoods, both pedestrian and vehicular, went up. So the net amount of traffic in, say, New York City stayed about the same even during the pandemic, went down a little bit, but not too much. And now what you're starting to see is these neighborhoods have much more activity and the center districts have much less activity, or still some activity, but less activity than they had pre-pandemic, particularly on Monday and Friday when people are not going into the office as much. So I think one of the most interesting things is how, and doesn't work at like internet speed because it's in real physical space, but how cities are starting to adapt, and you're starting to see cities that have central business districts that are multi-purpose with entertainment and live events and residential are doing much better than cities that are just offices. And what you're seeing now is a rise of multi-use and multi-use developments. And this is even true in the mall space. People thought malls were all dead, and malls went like this, but now they've kind of leveled out and starting to come back.
Oh,
And they're not
really?
retail locations anymore; they're restaurants, they're event venues, they're comedy clubs, they're mini museums, escape rooms, virtual
Yes,
reality
more
studios.
experiential. Yeah.
Experiential, exactly. So people want to do things in real life because there's no substitute for real life. And as you build these multi-use developments, you're going to see that more and more. And I think where technology comes in is the cost of doing these VR escape rooms and doing these kind of experiential places like the giant Monet exhibit. That's come down pretty dramatically. So I do think people are going to be very aggressive in programming public space. And I do think, location-based entertainment and live events is really going to boom in the coming years, because you've got this is where technology meets the consumer need. There's a huge consumer need to do things in real life. We all got sick of sitting in front of Zoom, and there's a huge need for and the cost of doing these types of experiences has come way down. And there's a lot of real estate in cities that's available right now. So when those three things come together, I think you're going to see a huge boom in that area. And where we benefit is, look, we have a lot of promotional muscle to send people to places. So we're thrilled when that happens, because they're our clients and they're our partners, and we want those to be successful. And that also has the benefit is we just want people in cities, because that's how we sell our advertising, and we need cities to be vibrant. And for the most part, most of the cities are back. They just look different, and they're continuing to look different and continuing to evolve.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Do you ever feel like there's in the urban environment, it can actually be overwhelming and distracting? Like I know sometimes, like I live in Utah, where we have a little less of the urban environment, and so sometimes when I go to New York and there's just constant advertising, it can be a little bit of noise. How do you guys make yourselves differentiate or stand out or be something that doesn't necessarily create any kind of negative reaction from the public?
Well, usually we're providing a service. So, people value the service. As I said, we do free Wi-Fi, so that's one
Yes.
thing. Second thing is we try to put content on our screens. That could be creators, that could be art, that could be useful things like the weather or what time your train is coming. And I do think that drives engagement, right? Because if you're sitting on a train platform, what time your train's coming, that's like the Super Bowl for you. That's something you're really going to pay attention to, right? So you're going to watch it. So I think bringing that value to consumers and then interspersing the ads to it makes a big difference. So we want to both inform people and delight people. We'll do fun things. We've done some great art exhibits on the lake. We've done the sports scores. We did the Olympic medal trackers,
Cool.
that kind of thing. If the schools are closed for a snowstorm, we take over all the screens and say the schools are closed. So we try to provide a real service to the community, and people generally approve. I think we did a Link's approval rating. We looked at it. The Link NYC network had like a 90% approval rating. And, at his height, Derek Jeter had an 85% approval rating. So in New York City. So we had a higher, Link was more popular than Derek Jeter in New York City, which I think is a good thing to say.
Wow, that's awesome. And then kind of segueing into creating a service or value. So I was the executive producer the first 4 years of a thing called the Global Citizen Festival and the chief development officer. And in New York City, so much of that, advertising was donated in kind for us because of the great cause. Have you guys done much with partnering with, donating space that isn't being used in kind to worthy causes and
Yeah.
NGOs and groups that have a message that are like a public service good?
Yeah, I put it in three areas. One is we do a lot of free content just for the city itself. So community boards, what time your train's coming, that kind of thing is certainly a big chunk of what we'll do. The second area is we do partner, with nonprofits and particularly city, um, urban nonprofits. So we were very much involved in the We Love New York campaign with the Partnership for New York City, which was an effort to rebrand and reboot New York City. We donated 1 billion ad impressions to that campaign.
Incredible.
We'll do stuff like that. And then the last thing is we do have a program for small businesses where if you're a local business and you want 1 or 2 screens for a few weeks, we'll provide that an opportunity for you to get that for free because we're not going to sell into that. But we think, supporting small business is core to both our mission of making cities better and an area where we can help.
That's so generous. Thank you for doing all that. How do you pick these causes, and do these organizations reach out to you? Are they chosen at the C-suite level based on like pet projects or what you feel elected to? Is it based on your clients' recommendations? Like you have a big brand that goes, "This is the group we want, to support," or what's that process like?
We work on behalf of the cities and the transit authorities. So a lot of it's driven by, if it's something that the mayor of New York City is behind or the mayor of Philadelphia is behind, we get behind that because they're our partners. So I think that's probably the biggest driver. If this is something where the government, the elected officials are really behind, or other, booster organizations. I think, for instance, New York, one of the things that's really driven the rebirth of New York City coming out of the pandemic is the Partnership for New York City, where the business community in New York, whether they be smaller businesses like us or the big giant New York City businesses, all of us are very committed to making New York City better. And I think so. If the Partnership for New York gets behind something, we want to be a partner with our colleagues in the business community.
Amazing. So, like going back to Salt Lake City, I'm sitting here thinking, in order for you guys to we don't have an NFL here. We do have
basketball though.
We do have a basketball team with the Utah Jazz. When you look at investing or approaching a city like Salt Lake City, for example, potentially, do you? I'm thinking about the Olympics. Like, is the cost prohibitive to like build the infrastructure, or could you just do one of your activations, like your charging stations during the Olympics, and you can activate around? And do you look at those based on demand signals, or do you sit down and really strategically go, and we need to be there. Let's try to get ahead of headlights. That's years out, but if we get these relationships in now, we'll be able to monetize that. And at what point do you realize, well, does the program have to like completely pay for itself with ads before you do it, or you put the infrastructure in and then sell against it? Like, chicken and egg. It's so fascinating, your strategy.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So Salt Lake City is an interesting city because there's really 2 big criteria: is the density of the urban core, because you do need a big sort of dense urban core.
Yeah.
And the second is the size of the advertising market, particularly the out-of-home advertising market. And there's a third piece is regulation and what the sign code is. There are cities that just don't allow you to do advertising. So, it makes it a bit harder if you can't put an ad on the infrastructure. Salt Lake City is interesting. I've actually, full disclosure, never been to Salt Lake City. I have been to Utah. I've been to southern Utah, which was spectacular, but not made it to Salt Lake City yet. And so I don't know the city at all. But we did actually look at it when the Transit Authority came up for bid a couple of years ago. And I think one of the things that's interesting for a city like Salt Lake and some of these cities that are a bit more spread out is how they think about their transit systems and transit infrastructure in as the future develops. And I think as probably the opportunity for a city like that is something we're looking at very closely right now is the rise of micromobility. And this is bike share, this is scooters, and electric bikes and mopeds and scooters. And I think for more spread out cities, that is an opportunity that, maybe the classical mass transit train bus doesn't work as well.
Yes.
But, as micromobility grows, that's an area where I think for a city like Salt Lake City, we'd be very interested in looking into because, bike share is an interesting business, both inherently for as an amenity, but people like bike share and they like to go around bikes, and also bike parking lots, which is good for that. But also it's an interesting advertising opportunity as well with this, you put ads on the stations, you put ads on the bikes. So I think something like that would probably be most relevant for a city like Salt Lake. But again, I'm speaking a bit out of turn because I've never actually been to the city. And one thing I love about my job is I get to go to these cities and spend a decent amount of time walking around, because if you're not on the ground and taking a look at what's going on in the city, it's very hard to,
Makes sense.
make these kinds of make
Decision.
these kinds of statements.
Yeah, that's super. That's super insightful. So, Chris, when you, because you were at NBC Universal, do you find a lot of movie advertising is interested in your guys' services? I would think that's like kind of where we mostly see movie ads is like in environmental. I mean, it's like one of the premier places that I think most people associate movie advertising.
Yeah, if you look at New York and Los Angeles,
Yeah.
studios are the largest, among the largest out of the five big media companies, largest. Again, technology is affecting that though, right? Because I think you're seeing fewer big blockbuster launches with lots and lots of money behind them. You're seeing more investment in streaming. So, we do have, most of the big streamers have long-term deals with our assets, and sometimes we'll create like an impression bank for a streaming service where they'll have some baseline amount of advertising, and then they'll pulse the advertising when they launch a new TV show. But that's a lot of on the streaming service. But that's a lot of where I think the entertainment business is going. I do think you'll still see these big movie launches, and that's obviously a big category for us. But I also think the streaming is an important area of investment that. The media companies are still working through exactly how to make the math work properly there. But I do think their need to promote both to win new users, but also retain users and get people, coming back to use it is important. And also, there's a lot of, particularly in New York and Los Angeles, a lot of business to business advertising that goes on. And a lot of those, you can't, and we're not in the billboard business in LA, but, you go to the Sunset Strip in Los Angeles, everybody's got a billboard there.
Yeah.
And, you can't really launch a movie for the billboard and Sunset Strip. It's got nothing to do with putting people in seats. It's got everything to do with, if I'm a, star in a movie, I need my billboard on the Sunset Strip.
Right. That's really funny. I wondered that because I remember thinking, I wonder how effective this actually is in driving behavior, but that's really fascinating.
Well, we do have a lot of proof that, Link in particular drives people into seats for sure.
Wow.
And we've looked at this with movie campaigns and whether or not people show up in the movie theater, and we definitely see a significant lift if people see the ads, whether or not they go to the theater or not.
How awesome is that? So this is a little bit of a hard question. What do advertisers and/or does Intersection do regarding like the ethics of advertising? So we have a ton of research in psychology that shows the discontented aspects of like the beauty industry consistently making women feel like they're not enough, for example, or, people being so driven by materialism that actually like is quite harmful. When we're looking in an industry that is promoting that, what are the checks and balances? How do you as a leader talk about these ethics internally? Is there any self-awareness about that? And what is the industry at large doing to maybe like help address some of the aspects that are pretty harmful in the advertising world?
It's a good question. I think what our point of view is we work on behalf of the cities and the transit authorities. So everything we look at is both through the lens of what's right for the city and what's going to be acceptable, what type of creative is going to be acceptable in that city and to that transit authority. And they hold us to that as well. So I think that's the lens we look at all creative through. And we've got pretty well established ad policies in different jurisdictions on what we can and can't do. Beyond that, we do work in public space, and we try to, we enforce our ad policies, but we don't put ourselves as editors within those ad policies. We're arbitrators of the policies that we agree with the cities, because that's how it has to work.
So your personal ideology as a leader doesn't come into play. Like, for example, if somebody was, pushing out propaganda, but they could pay you to do it, would that impact your, for example, decision making? Is there any kind of like ethics framework for anything you guys do, or like you said, you just don't play editor? It's through the city that a lot of
Well,
funds.
we don't take issue advertising in most of our jurisdictions, so it's not. Um, we just don't take. If you want to advertise, we don't take political. Most of our jurisdictions don't allow us to take, for instance, political. So if
Okay.
you've got a political statement to make, we just don't take the ad because you
Yeah.
can't. If you're gonna, political advertising is tricky. Like you got to set very clear ground rules, and you either got to take it or you don't take it. And in many cases, we don't take it, and some of that's really a decision that we've come to with our with our partners. Or if we do take it, we've got very clear guidelines where you can, hey, vote for me, hey, get out and vote, but that's basically about it. But again, you gotta, if you're, we are we have to set a very clear set of standards and policies. Like we don't have guns on any of our creative, right, stuff like that. But you got to set those bright line rules, and then you got to arbitrate within the bright line rules. And that's got to be more of a as I said, we have to judge and make judgments based on principles that we agree to in our policies.
That's awesome. So there are those guiding principles. That's cool to hear, Chris. So on a personal level, can you share a time when you faced setbacks or failures as a leader, and or things that you've overcome that you look back and you're like, wow, these are these profound existential lessons or character building lessons that you want to share?
Well, we were running an out-of-home advertising business in major U.S. cities and transit authorities during the pandemic. So I was a COO at the time, but like our revenue was down 75% in Q2 2020. We had the best. We were up 15% year over year in Q1 2020, best first quarter in the history of the company. And then Q2 was down 75% year over year. For 14 consecutive weeks, we had zero bookings. Business basically ground to a halt through the summer of 20, and then was roughly 50% of what it was, through back half of 20. First quarter 21 was terrible because the combination of, the pandemic rearing back and people realizing it's going to be a longer pandemic, plus January 6th, where again, 3 weeks, no bookings after January 6th. It was a very, very difficult time for us. We had to restructure a lot of the business. We had to, unfortunately, downsize the staff of the company. We took some government loans. We renegotiated all of our deals with our partners. So it was a very tricky situation. 5 quarters of very tricky situation to work through for sure.
How stressful, and you got through it, Chris. Way to go. Did you have to do a lot of layoffs in that season? Did you have to downsize the company?
We did definitely had to shrink the company, significantly. Both we in some cases they were more temporary layoffs where we've got the staff that goes out and hangs the signs, and there were no signs to hang. So
Sure.
we had to furlough a lot of our operations staff. It was interesting, and this is why good government is great. That was during the time period of enhanced unemployment. So it was nice because we could lay those guys off, and they stayed whole. They were making as much on the enhanced unemployment as they were for working, and they all wanted to work. But they realized there was no work, and we couldn't afford to pay them. And honestly, we didn't really want them in the warehouse where they could spread COVID to each other. So we furloughed folks. But again, what was nice is with the enhanced unemployment benefits, they were able to stay home for a few months that they were furloughed. But then we also had to more structurally downsize the company because we had to operate under lower revenue.
Wow, that's super insightful.
And that was hard, obviously.
Yeah, it's super insightful. Sometimes you don't hear about these certain industries. Like I haven't never thought about the advertising industry. Honestly, that never even came across my mind. I thought about all the other industries impacted. And it's interesting.
Look, we had it too, and we were actually a essential business, so we did have people operating in the field because we had to keep the screens going and working with the transit authorities. A lot of consumer messaging is really important during that time.
Yeah.
Trains were all running just with a lot fewer people. We had 2 problems with the pandemic. Problem 1 was an audience problem. the audience went like this because no one's riding the trains, no one's going to work,
Right.
no one's in center cities, no one's going to the movies. But also we had a advertiser problem in that many of our ad categories were shut down. Cruise lines are a big ad category. Travel is a big ad category. Movies, as we talked about, is a big ad category. Broadway theater is a huge ad category for us. Those were all done and shut down. Quick serve restaurants is a big ad category for us. All kinds of live entertainment's a big ad category. So those categories just went to zero. So that was obviously challenging. Challenging time for us to navigate. It was it was challenging for everybody, and obviously the pandemic also was a terrible thing across many dimensions, but it was a very challenging business environment for sure. I worked in digital media. My previous job, I'd launched a online fitness service with Hearst, and it would have been much better to be in the online fitness business in 2020 than the at-home advertising business for sure.
That's super interesting. And just I'm thinking, I mean, I can't believe we went through that as a global community, right? Sometimes it feels like a hazy dream. So Chris,
you realize how much people really value real life. And I think that's why you see so much joy in people going out of restaurants, people going to concerts, people wanting to go to, Disneyland and stuff like that. Is everyone, people like to be in real life. And I think in some ways taking real life away from people really validated the need for real life, and in many ways validated our media as being very valuable.
Absolutely. So Chris, kind of as a last question, what are you most looking forward to in your business, in your life, like that you're working on personally or professionally? Like what is the thing that's blows your hair back, so to speak, at the moment?
Well, honestly, on a business perspective, normalcy. We've had a lot of ups and downs in the business, and this year we've had we're having good growth, but it's not been great. It hasn't been, we're not dealing with, downturns. I think the economy is, a couple of weeks ago, notwithstanding, the economy's been reasonably solid. Just operating the business normally and not in crisis mode where, we were in crisis mode for 3 or 4 years. That's actually been the best part, just not having to, being more or less on plan and being able to just run the business and focus on, long-term planning. And to your point, where do you bid next and that kind of thing, as opposed to firefighting and figuring out how to get out of the pandemic. And then, then we had to staff up a lot of the team as we sort of came back to growth and what that growth trajectory looks like. And, didn't quite get to where we thought we would get to. So it's just good to be, business as usual, and a return to normalcy is probably the best thing. And then, on a personal level, my older one's is going to start college in a couple of weeks, so that's an exciting thing for sure.
That's so exciting! Oh my gosh, how many kids do you have, by the way, Chris?
2. I've got one. One's going to be starting high school, and then one's starting college. So that's exciting. I'm excited for both of them. Obviously,
that's so fun. That's so fun. Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've loved learning about your approach to advertising, and I never even heard it advertising called at home. Advertising
out of home.
Out of home versus at home. I mean, that's so helpful to think about. And, I think it's amazing that your career has led you into such incredible leadership. And thank you for your insights and learning about your industry. If any of our listeners want to advertise with you, or they want to learn more about, your services, how can they connect, and what's the best way for them to do so?
www.intersection.com. Come to our website and check it out, or look me up on LinkedIn if you want to reach out to me directly.
Amazing, Chris. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Lindsay.
Do you need help with the next steps for your financial plan? Think Capita. Capita is a financial network built around you. They have a team of financial advisors, CPAs, estate attorneys, Medicare providers, and Social Security experts to help you accomplish your financial goals. Call to schedule a complimentary consultation at 801-566-5058 or visit their website at www.capitafinancialnetwork.com. You can also check out their financial education podcast, The Financial Call, available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and YouTube.